portions of goods that befalls me. So he divided to them his livelihood. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a faraway country, and wasted his possessions in prodigal living. So in this parable, we have two sons. The younger of the two decides that he is ready for his inheritance. He wanted his share of his father's wealth, and he wanted it right now. Usually a child will receive the inheritance after the father dies. So by asking for the inheritance now, the son is actually saying to the father, since you are taking so long to die, I am not willing to wait for your death. He is essentially asking his father to drop down dead right now. But since that is not happening, he's saying to the father, I want my money, and I want it now. It's so interesting, he didn't even work for it. And he is demanding it, as if he earned it. Now this son was rude. He was selfish and out of place. He was a little brute. And I don't have any children. But if I were that father, and a son comes to me demanding my money, out of place little boy, giving him a backhand. What? Now this son wanted nothing to do with his father. He wanted nothing to do with taking care of the estate. But he wanted his portion of the money. He wanted to enjoy the benefits of being a son without the responsibility of being a son. He wanted the money, but he did not want to work. And so the Bible tells us that the father gave a third of his wealth to the son, and he left rejoicing. It was a happy day for that son. He was young, rich, and free, without a care in the world. He didn't have to worry about going to feed the sheep anymore. He didn't have to worry about taking care of the crop, because he was now liberated from his father. He would leave that responsibility for his older brother. And later on we'll come back to the older brother. And then the son goes away to a far away country. He wanted to go as far as possible away from his father. He wanted nothing to do with his father. He was trying to remove from his mind the memory and the thought of his father and the loved ones at home. So the Bible says he wasted his money in prodigal living. Some versions say wild living. Some say reckless living. Some say foolish living. Well, the prodigal son lived a wild, foolish, and wasteful life. And because he was having a good time, he forgot that his resources were limited. And so he was spending, and spending. And he was not thinking about the time that his money will run out. And we all know that the fool and his money will soon depart from each other. So with his newly inherited wealth, life was good for this prodigal son. He lived a life of luxury. I could imagine him spending nights at luxury resorts. I could imagine that he attracted the wrong type of ladies. I can imagine that they were flocking him because there's something about women and money. And I'm not talking about those here. Those the women we have here are the sanctified, blood-washed women. But you will all agree that there is something about women and money.
They can't get enough
so
of
today,
it.
if you are here today,
Can't get enough of it.
and you have a woman, and you don't have money, it is a blessing. If she loves you, even though you are broke, it's a blessing. Now, when my wife got married to me, I was working in a place called Health Foods. And I was working for about $800 EC a month. And she still loved me. And that was a blessing. And so he had all the women flocking him.
Short is.
He also had persons whom he considered his friends flocking him. I could imagine that wherever he went, he had an entourage. I could imagine that when he went to the bars, he would buy rounds for everyone. He was popular. He wore the most fancy clothes and the fancy jewelry. When he stepped out, as I said, he had his crew to follow him, his entourage. And our young people would say when he touched down, the whole place shelled down. When this young man touched down, the whole place shelled down. Some of you who look confused, it's because you are a little too old. Now, life could not have been any better for this young man. He was rich, free, and popular. Wherever he went, he called the shots. He was living an immoral life, a sinful life, but he was satisfied because he was enjoying himself. In fact, when we read the Bible, we realize that something all of a sudden went wrong. Something went wrong. The Bible says there came a great famine. The Bible says from verse 14, and when he had spent all, there arose a severe famine in the land, and he began to be in want. So the young man who just some time ago had everything, now he was in want. And so then he joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into the fields to feed the swine. And verse 16 says, and he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything. So as we read the parable, we realize that there is a drastic shift in the narrative. He went from being a young man who was living it up, and he ended up in a pig pen. And what is so striking to me is that the Bible says that no one gave him anything. He was between a rock and a hard place. And this parable tells me that it is important for us to know who our real friends are. So here we see in this parable that this man, who was the it factor, he was now in a pig pen. And so all the girls who he thought loved him, they ended up scorning him. The business places where he spent thousands, they forgot about him. He was on the very verge of starving to death. And so he went from glory to shame. He went from up high to down low. He went from rich to poor. He went from popular to unwanted. This young man, in a moment, he was brought down low. The Bible says he was hungry and no one offered him anything to eat. And so he attached himself to a citizen of that faraway country, and he became a professional pig feeder. Now, he not only fed pigs, he became so desperate that he would gladly fill his belly with pig's food. Now, that is nasty. When we were smaller, we used to keep a bucket on the outside to collect pig food for someone. And we would put anything in that. And that thing was stink and smelly. If you have leftover soup and you don't want it anymore, you dash it there. If you peel the potato and you don't want the skin, you dash it there. Whatever you put it there. And just imagine, a son of a rich man, he got to the point when he saw the pigs eating, and when he realized that he was so hungry and he had nothing to eat, he went and he robbed the innocent pigs of their food. Now I want us to see this young man. This young man, a son of a rich man, and he was a Jew. And when we read the Bible, we know Jews did not associate with pigs whatsoever. But now this young man, he is feeding the pigs, but he is also eating the pigs' food. I want to let someone know tonight, or today, sorry, if you allow sin to fester in your life, it will eventually destroy you. When you dance with the devil, you would have to pay the price. When you mess around with Satan, he does not change, but he changes you. And that's why Peter wants us to be sober and to be vigilant. Because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. I want you to know that Satan wants to destroy you. But at the same time, Jesus wants to deliver you. And that is the good news that we preach under this tent. That salvation comes through Jesus and Jesus alone. And as we skip forward to verse 17, the Bible says, and when he came to himself, amen, he said, how many hired servants of my father have bread enough to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and I am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. So eventually, this son came to his senses. He decided to go back to his father's house, not as a son, but to apply for employment. He recognized that even the servants were better than he was. Because they had something to eat, and the Bible says they had enough to spare. And so he decided to put aside his pride. And he was going to beg his father to hire him. In his mind, he was no longer worthy to be called the son. And he was right. Based on his actions, he was no longer worthy to be called a son. In his mind, he was not good enough to be a son. And he was right. And so he opts to be a servant. But then the Bible tells us that something very interesting happened. From verse 20, and he arose and came to his father's house. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion on him, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And verse 21 says, and when the son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, and in thy sight I am no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servants, bring forth the best robe and put it on him, and bring a ring and put it on his finger, and give him some shoes and put it on his feet, and bring hither the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For my son, he was dead and he is alive again. He was lost, but now he is found, and they began to be merry.
Man.
Now this caught the son off guard, because the son knew that he was not worthy to be a son anymore. But the Bible tells us that the father, when he sees his son, he looks and he got up and he ran to his son, because he realized that his son, though he was dead, now he is alive. He recognized that the son, though he was lost, now he is found. So the Bible says that he kissed him. And I want us to see the son as he was trotting back home. He must have been in shame. I could see him walking to his father's house with his head hung low. And he was trying to put his words together, so that when he approached his father, he could say, Father, I'm sorry. Father, I was wrong. Daddy, please give me a job as one of your slaves. Daddy, I took your money. I wanted you to be dead. And I went to a faraway country because I wanted nothing to do with you. Daddy, I beg you, please take me back as a servant. But even before he was able to utter a word, the Bible says that the father runs to meet him, and he kissed him. The son must have been stink and smelly like pig's food. But the father kissed him. He embraced him. He clothed him. And then he said, go for the fatted calf. Now this is good news. Because the Bible did not say bring one of the fatted calves or bring a fatted calf. The Bible says bring the fatted calf. No, I don't like to speculate here. But Dr. Chaitan, I believe that this calf would have been placed aside. This suggests to me that the father was waiting for the day which his son will return. So he had a calf there. And this calf was given special food. In the English translation, it says the fatted calf. But in the Greek, it says the fattened calf. It means that the calf that was intentionally fattened. I believe with all my heart that this father was waiting for his son. And so he had this calf placed aside. And so when his son came home, it was a big rejoicing. But while all this rejoicing was going on, while everyone was happy because the son returned, and I want you to listen to me carefully, there was another prodigal son who was angry that his brother was found. Now when we read the Bible and we look at this passage, we think there is only one prodigal son. I want to suggest to you that there are two prodigal sons. One went out and lived a wild life, but the other stayed home and he was bitter. He was a prodigal as well, though he stayed at home. The Bible says in verse 28, but when he was angry and would not go in, that's after he heard the noise, therefore his father came out to him and pleaded with him. And so he answered and said to him, lo, these many years I have been serving you. I have never transgressed your commands at any time, and yet you never gave me a goat, that I might make merry with my friends. Oh Lord, have mercy. But as soon, and hear how, look at the language, the way he distances himself away from his brother. In verse 30, the Bible says, but as soon as this son of yours came, who has devoured your livelihood with harlots, and you killed the fatted calf for him. And he said to him, son, you are always with me, and all that I have is yours. It was right that we should go and make merry and be glad, for your brother was dead and is alive again, was lost and is now found. Now this brother would have been happy if his younger brother stayed out and died in his sins. And that's why I call him a prodigal. He was angry. He was upset that his father gave to the brother the fattened calf. If you're not careful, maybe it was that same brother who was fattening the calf. And maybe he thought that one day he will be able to get it. And so he was upset that his brother was given the fattened calf, because in his mind he was home all along. And he was working hard for his father. And he said, Daddy, you did not even give me a goat, but you are giving him a fattened calf. But the sad reality about the second son is that he was working for what was already his. The father said to him, everything that I have, it is already yours. Why are you killing yourself for one fatted calf? He was working and working for what was already his.